In the quiet centuries before the clash of bronze and fire that would later be remembered as the Trojan War, the Aegean world breathed at a slower, steadier pace, shaped by the rhythms of sea travel, agriculture, ritual, and oral memory. This was an age without a single Greece, an era of scattered kingdoms bound together by language, gods, and the restless waters between islands and coasts. Mycenae, Tiryns, Pylos, Ithaca, Sparta, each was a fortified center ruled by warrior kings whose power rested on lineage, land, and the favor of the gods. Across the sea stood Troy, or Walusa as the Hittites called it, a wealthy city guarding the vital trade routes between the Aegean and Anatolia. Its high walls were not merely defensive structures but symbols of prosperity, diplomacy, and survival. Trade ships carried tin, copper, textiles, and stories, while emissaries negotiated marriages and alliances to prevent the fragile balance of power from collapsing. This was a world where honor was currency, reputation was inheritance, and memory was preserved not in books but in song. Bards carried the past in their voices, shaping history into rhythm and repetition so it could survive generations. The Iliad, born from this oral tradition, does not begin with the war's cause or its end, but with its emotional core, rage. Yet to understand that rage, we must first understand the society that produced it. Men were judged by bravery, generosity, and loyalty, women by their lineage, beauty, and the alliances they secured through marriage. The gods were not distant abstractions but active forces who quarreled, loved, deceived, and intervened directly in human affairs. A storm at sea, a plague in camp, or a sudden victory in battle was never accidental, it was divine intention made visible. In this world, peace was temporary, war inevitable, and destiny unavoidable. The seeds of conflict lay dormant in old rivalries, broken oaths, and the ever-present tension between desire and duty. When Paris of Troy would later choose Aphrodite's promise of love over Hera's power and Athena's wisdom, he was not acting outside the norms of his world, he was fulfilling them. Thus, before the first spear was thrown, before Achilles withdrew from battle, and before Hector faced his fate beneath Troy's walls, the stage was already set by centuries of tradition, belief, and unspoken expectation. The Iliad is not merely a story of war, it is a window into a civilization standing at the edge of myth and history, where every human action echoed in the realm of the gods. The Trojan War, as remembered through the Iliad, does not arise from a single act of violence but from a chain of choices that reflect the fragile psychology of heroic society. At its heart lies the abduction, or elopement, of Helen, the most beautiful woman in the world, wife of Menelaus, king of Sparta. Her departure with Paris, Prince of Troy, was not merely a personal betrayal but a political catastrophe. Helen was bound by oath, and her marriage had been secured through a pact among the Greek kings, each swearing to defend her union to prevent future bloodshed. When that oath was broken, honor demanded response. Agamemnon, king of Mycenae and brother to Menelaus, became the reluctant leader of a vast coalition, summoning warriors from across the Aegean. Odysseus came from Ithaca, cunning and cautious. Ajax arrived with brute strength and unwavering resolve. Nestor brought wisdom shaped by age, and Achilles, son of Peleus and the sea nymph Thetis, came knowing that glory would cost him his life. The gathering at Aulis, delayed by ill winds and divine displeasure, revealed the true cost of war even before it began. Sacrifice was demanded. Agamemnon's daughter, Iphigenia, offered to appease Artemis. Whether she died or was saved by the goddess varies by tradition, but the message remains the same: war consumes innocence first. When the fleet finally sailed, it carried not only soldiers and weapons but resentment, fear, and ambition. Upon reaching Troy, the Greeks discovered that victory would not be swift. The city stood strong, aided by allies from across Anatolia and defended by Hector, Troy's greatest warrior and a man bound as deeply to family as to honor. For 9 long years, the war stagnated into raids, skirmishes, and attrition. Heroes rose and fell, but the walls of Troy remained unbroken. The Iliad enters this prolonged conflict not at its beginning, but at its breaking point, where personal pride threatens collective survival. Agamemnon's seizure of Briseis, a captive woman claimed by Achilles, ignites the central conflict of the poem. This act is not about desire but dominance. It is a public humiliation that strips Achilles of honor. In a society where reputation defines existence, such an insult is unbearable. Achilles' withdrawal from battle is both a personal protest and a catastrophic political decision. As he steps away, the balance of power shifts, and the gods themselves take sides. Thus, the war that began with Helen's departure now teeters on the edge of disaster, driven not by strategy but by wounded pride. The Iliad shows us that wars are rarely sustained by their original causes. They are prolonged by human emotion, misunderstanding, and the inability to let go of perceived injustice. At the center of the Iliad stands Achilles, a figure both terrifying and deeply human, whose rage shapes the destiny of armies and the will of the gods. Born of a mortal father and a divine mother, Achilles exists between worlds, belonging fully to neither. His mother, Thetis, knows his fate, that he may live a long, obscure life at home or die young in battle and be remembered forever. Achilles chooses glory, but that choice does not free him from pain. His rage begins not as blind fury but as a calculated withdrawal, a refusal to participate in a system that has wronged him. By denying the Greeks his strength, Achilles exposes the fragile structure of heroic warfare, where individual excellence outweighs collective discipline. As Trojan forces, emboldened by divine support, push the Greeks back to their ships, Achilles watches from the sidelines, torn between satisfaction and regret. Patroclus, his closest companion, becomes the moral bridge between isolation and responsibility. When Patroclus begs to enter battle wearing Achilles' armor, it is not merely a tactical move but a symbolic act, reminding Achilles of what his absence has cost. Patroclus' death at the hands of Hector shatters Achilles' restraint and transforms his rage into something darker and more destructive. This is no longer anger at injustice but grief-seeking expression. Achilles' return to battle is marked by brutality, his humanity slipping as he becomes an instrument of death. Rivers choke with bodies, and even the gods recoil at his excess. When Achilles finally confronts Hector, the duel is inevitable yet tragic. Hector fights not for glory but for Troy, for his wife Andromache and his son Astyanax, for a future he knows he may never see. Achilles kills Hector and desecrates his body, dragging it behind his chariot, a violation of sacred custom that reveals how far rage has carried him. Yet the Iliad does not end with vengeance. It ends with an act of profound humanity. When Priam, king of Troy, enters Achilles' tent to beg for his son's body, he does so not as an enemy but as a grieving father. In that moment, Achilles sees his own father reflected in Priam's tears. Rage dissolves into shared mortality. Achilles weeps, and for a brief moment, war pauses. The Iliad suggests that rage is both a destructive force and a catalyst for understanding. It can isolate and dehumanize, but it can also lead, through suffering, to empathy. Achilles remains a hero not because he is flawless, but because he is capable of change, even at the edge of his own doom. If Achilles represents the destructive power of individual rage, Hector embodies the weight of responsibility carried by those who fight not for personal glory but for collective survival. As the eldest son of Priam and heir to Troy, Hector stands as the city's primary defender, a role he neither sought nor can abandon. Unlike Achilles, Hector does not question the structure of heroic society. He accepts its demands even when they conflict with his desires. His most human moment comes not on the battlefield but within the walls of Troy, when he meets Andromache and their infant son. Here, the epic pauses to show us the true cost of war. Andromache pleads with Hector to stay, to fight from the walls, to choose family over honor. Hector knows that Troy may fall and that Andromache may become a captive, yet he cannot escape the expectations placed upon him. His identity is inseparable from his role as protector. This sense of duty gives Hector a quiet nobility, but it also seals his fate. Hector fights knowing he is likely to die, not because he seeks death, but because survival without honor would mean the loss of everything he values. On the battlefield, Hector is formidable, leading Trojan forces with courage and tactical awareness. Yet he is also vulnerable, subject to fear and doubt. When Achilles returns to battle, Hector briefly considers retreat, circling the walls of Troy in a moment of raw terror that strips away heroic idealization. This hesitation does not diminish him, it makes him real. When Hector finally stands to face Achilles, he does so knowing the outcome, driven by the belief that his death may still serve Troy's memory. His final request, that his body be returned to his family, is denied, and in that denial, the audience is forced to confront the cruelty embedded within heroic codes. Hector's death marks the emotional climax of the Iliad, not because it ensures Greek victory, but because it represents the loss of Troy's future. Through Hector, the Iliad reminds us that wars are not defined solely by their victors, but by those who carry the heaviest burdens and lose the most. Hector's legacy is not conquest, but dignity in the face of inevitability. The gods of the Iliad are omnipresent, shaping events not as distant overseers but as emotionally invested participants. Zeus, Hera, Athena, Apollo, Aphrodite, and others align themselves with mortals, driven by favoritism, resentment, and desire. Their interventions raise profound questions about fate and free will. While destiny looms as an unchangeable force, Hector must die, Troy must fall. The path toward that destiny is crowded with divine interference. Apollo sends plagues, Athena grants strength, Hera manipulates Zeus, and Thetis pleads for her son. Yet despite their power, the gods are bound by fate as much as humans are. They can delay, intensify, or soften events, but they cannot alter the ultimate outcome. This tension reflects ancient Greek attempts to understand suffering within a structured universe. If the gods are responsible, then human pain has meaning, even if it is cruel. At the same time, the gods mirror human flaws, turning war into a reflection of divine discord. Their presence amplifies conflict rather than resolving it. The Iliad does not portray piety as protection. Heroes who honor the gods still die, while those who offend them may thrive temporarily. Instead, the poem presents a world where divine favor is unstable and unreliable. Mortals navigate this uncertainty through ritual, prayer, and sacrifice, seeking moments of control within chaos. The gods also serve as narrative devices, allowing the poem to explore internal states, fear, confidence, despair, through external action. When Athena restrains Achilles from killing Agamemnon, she represents reason interrupting impulse. When Apollo guides Paris' arrow to Achilles' heel in later tradition, he becomes the instrument of fate. Ultimately, the Iliad suggests that while humans may blame gods for their suffering, the true tragedy lies in humanity's inability to escape its own nature. Pride, love, fear, and loyalty drive actions as much as any divine decree. The gods are not excuses, they are mirrors. The Iliad offers one of the most detailed literary portraits of ancient warfare, blending heroic idealization with moments of stark realism. Combat is intimate and brutal, fought at close range with spears, swords, and shields. Warriors are identified not as anonymous figures but as individuals with names, lineages, and histories, often recounted moments before their deaths. This narrative technique transforms battle into a procession of human stories, emphasizing loss over spectacle. Armor gleams, chariots thunder, and formations break into chaotic duels. Yet beneath the poetry lies an understanding of fear, exhaustion, and randomness. Heroes boast before battle, but victory is never guaranteed. A slipped footing, a distracted glance, or a god's intervention can mean death. The treatment of the dead reflects cultural values. Burial rites are essential for peace in the afterlife, and denial of burial is a profound dishonor. Achilles' abuse of Hector's body shocks not because it is violent, but because it violates a shared moral boundary. The Iliad does not glorify war as clean or noble, it presents it as necessary, tragic, and consuming. Even the strongest warriors cannot escape mortality. The battlefield becomes a place where social hierarchies collapse, where kings and commoners fall alike. Through its detailed depictions of combat, the Iliad preserves a memory of Bronze Age warfare that resonates beyond myth, reminding listeners that behind every legend lies the reality of blood, pain, and irreversible loss. For the characters of the Iliad, glory, Kleos, is the promise of remembrance beyond death. In a world without written history, to be sung about was to exist eternally. This belief shapes every decision, pushing warriors toward risk and sacrifice. Achilles' choice of a short, glorious life over a long, obscure one reflects a cultural logic where memory outweighs longevity. Yet the Iliad itself questions this logic. It preserves not only triumph but grief, hesitation, and regret. By ending not with the fall of Troy but with Hector's funeral, the poem shifts focus from victory to mourning. The final image is not of conquest, but of shared humanity and loss. The song becomes an act of remembrance that honors both sides, refusing to reduce the enemy to caricature. In doing so, the Iliad transcends propaganda and becomes a meditation on what it means to be remembered. Glory is real, but it is inseparable from suffering. Memory preserves pain as faithfully as it preserves achievement. For listeners, ancient and modern alike, the Iliad offers a form of immortality not through power, but through understanding. To remember is to acknowledge complexity, to accept that heroes are flawed, and that even the greatest deeds cannot undo the cost of violence. Though rooted in myth, the Iliad occupies a space where archaeology and literature intersect. Excavations at Azarlik suggest a city destroyed around the Late Bronze Age, aligning loosely with traditional dates for Troy's fall. Mycenaean palaces, weapons, and tablets reveal a society consistent with Homer's descriptions. Yet the Iliad is not a historical record in the modern sense. It is a cultural memory shaped over centuries, blending fact with symbolism. Its endurance lies not in accuracy, but in relevance. The emotions it explores, rage, love, loyalty, grief, remain unchanged across time. As a documentary narrative, the Iliad invites us to reflect on the nature of war, leadership, and humanity itself. It asks why conflicts begin, why they persist, and what is lost when they end. To fall asleep to the Iliad is not to escape reality, but to enter a deeper contemplation of it, guided by a voice that echoes across millennia. In the quiet cadence of its verses, we find not answers, but recognition, a reminder that the struggles of the past continue to shape the present, and that within every epic lies a human story waiting to be remembered.